financial literacy, and the human condition. Welcome to Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Rayam.
And I'm talking to the listeners now. If you think that you who have not done this for a living are going to go in there and tell the story and be heard, I wish it were so, but it's not. To be heard, you've got to present in a way that's concise, that is in a format and in a way that the court can hear it quickly and understand and stop the presses for a second and go like, oh, we're about to make a big mistake. And we're going to really set these people up for a big, big problem.
Hi, it's Francis. I just wanted to take a minute to thank you for watching this video. If you're catching us on YouTube, please help us help others by clicking like, subscribe, and all notifications so you don't miss any videos. And check back for the next video. I think you're going to love it. Thanks again. For more information, you can visit us at hugyourmoney.com.
Welcome back to Financial Fitness. I'm Jay Dean, along with the Money Doctor, Francis Ram, and our guest, Christopher Anderson from New Leaf Family. I wanted to throw a quick question out here because this is something that I've learned in sales and in doing other things too. Everybody, and especially when they come to you, Christopher, everybody does things out of emotion. They're not going to necessarily look at things, objectively in the cold, cruel light of day.
I think you're absolutely right. From a financial perspective, if you think that you make bad decisions when you're, when you're slightly emotional, like you make a quick decision at the checkout counter because there was an end cap that had candy on it, if you think that's a bad financial decision, try making it when you're hurt or you're angry.
Yeah.
And see how your financial decisions are. And that's where a really good attorney can be worth their weight in gold, if you'll pardon that pun, because it's so emotional. But go ahead, Christopher, tell us what you have to say about that.
Well, I would actually caution that some very good attorneys, and by good attorneys in this context, I mean skilled, will oftentimes, unfortunately, actually drive up the emotion in the case. So I think, your listeners need to focus on their own emotional state and maybe, spend more time getting that really clear vision of the future and lead their attorneys towards that future. Right. And that's why we have that conversation, because because I don't listen. I'm a trial lawyer. You mentioned at the beginning of the show, like I was a criminal prosecutor. I like the courtroom. I like to win. And the people I hire tend to as well. But that's why we do this training, why we train ourselves, when we're dealing with family law, which is what we do, we got to think differently. There's no winning, right? There's a family that doesn't exist anymore. The win comes when we're done. The win comes from our clients moving forward into this new life. The wins do come from protecting them from unfairness and protecting them from overreach from the other side. But the biggest wins come from the clarity of purpose that comes from these future thoughts. I often advise our clients not to make any financial decisions while we're being,
That's right,
living through the throes of the emotion. Just like the time will come for that.
Yeah.
And if you are going to need to make a decision, let's talk about that future again, and then ask, okay, if you make this decision, does that help propel you towards that future, or does it hold you back, or does it send you sideways? Usually it sends you sideways.
Yeah, we call that a period of transition. And it happens in financial planning all over the place. But I will slow people right down if they've just inherited money, if they've gotten a divorce, if they've lost a partner, anything that adds and takes you out of your normal concept of what your life is like and upsets the apple cart. You're changing jobs, anything like that, moving to a new city. Those are all periods of transition where you don't really have the data you need yet to make the decision well. You haven't lived in that environment yet. Something is different for you. And so in divorce cases, we work as part of a collaborative team with some attorneys, and And that's what we do is we start the process that you folks are doing legally that most places don't. We start the process with what's this going to look like? How are we going to get the two of you through this? Because you're not going to win, either one of you. All you're going to do is pay lawyers all
Right.
this money. So you better minimize that and figure out what you want. And so we do a lot of that work to not only figure out what they want, but to figure out what the real numbers are. Which brings me to the point that even though we've been talking a lot about the emotional side of it, very important to people, I want to point out that you're in Colorado, and Colorado has something, if I'm correct about this, called the sworn financial statement. And every state has something very similar. We have something similar in Massachusetts. And it's designed for people to fill out the form about what their expenses are and somehow inform the court about what will be equitable, but it tends to lean more towards equal. Is this assessment correct? And what can you tell me about this
Well,
sworn
yeah,
financial statement?
yeah. The sworn financial statement, first of all, let's just answer what it is. And like most states have um, a version of it. Some don't, amazingly. But is basically think of it like a tax return in a way, right? You're advising the court, the decision maker, if you don't make the decision, which you should, of your financial circumstances through this form. You're also advising your spouse.
Mhm.
So the idea behind it is that if everybody knows everything, it'll be easier to come to agreement. Because if anybody thinks you're hiding stuff, it's harder to come to an agreement. And so it serves both the purpose of informing the court, but also of informing the other side. And it can be, it can be a very stressful thing for people to figure out, to fill out. Some people don't have experience. We get a lot of clients who would say, like, my spouse dealt with the money. I have no idea. Like,
Right.
I don't know what credit cards we have. I don't know what debts we have. I don't know what assets we have. I have no idea.
Yep.
And you have to start from there.
Yep.
But the purpose of it then in informing everybody is so that you can then come to an equitable distribution of the assets and debts that are listed in this sworn financial statement.
I think that's the intent behind the form, but I can only speak to what I see in Massachusetts, which is that the form is oversimplified. Estimate your groceries, estimate your rent. I mean,
Right.
people just make it up as they go along.
Absolutely.
And what I see is if we start with the clients here and we get the real expenses down about where they are now, we can parse out which expenses are going to belong to which partner, we can get a very clear picture, a very realistic, real life picture, and start to plan for the future based on that. When we're involved in helping them, guiding them with these numbers so that they can fill out the forms properly, then people really do know about everything and fairer decisions seem to be made. What I see, however, in the beginning, when people come to me and they've already submitted these forms, is that the one who completed it the best, the one who knew what they were doing the most, or the one who could make the numbers work to be the most believable wins, if there is a win, right? That they've put down numbers that make it look like they can't afford to pay the other person anything, or that they should get a lot from the other person, and it may not be the case. So, we both work with people who are going through these transitions. It's never a clean process, but it can be made better. We talked a little bit about why this form might be so critical, but I think, at least in our state, in the Commonwealth here, it seems to fall short. And I remember in our pre-show chat, you made a comment to me. You said, there's an old joke, I think, it was a fascinating comment about we went into law because we weren't good at math.
Yes. Yeah.
And I laughed about that. I thought that was pretty hysterical. But also, you were talking about something called math for law. Can you peel back the curtain a little bit and tell us what you're talking about there? What do lawyers really rely on in addition to this form, if anything? And what's it like to be a lawyer looking at the financial planning side of things?
Yeah. And it's challenging, right? Because I think a lot of lawyers will joke about that. Will say, I went into the law, so I didn't have to do math. Not true for me. Unfortunately, I came the math way. But for most lawyers, that's the case. And so there are softwares out there. You mentioned one of them, Math for Law. And every state, Math for Law supports many states.
Yes.
But there are a multitude of these softwares. Another one's called Family Law Software.
Yeah.
So those are the big two for Colorado, but different states have different ones. Some states actually publish their own calculators that you can just use the state one.
Yeah.
But regardless, what these are online calculators that let you put in the information based on a questionnaire, and then it organizes the information for you in a way that the court wants it. That fortunately, because the lawyers on the other side, we all know what it's supposed to look like. So it organizes it in a way we're used to digesting it. And then we'll do certain calculations. So for instance, if both sides put their information into Math for Law, Math for Law will then calculate what the child support is supposed to be. Math for Law will then calculate what the spousal support maintenance, or what people call alimony, is supposed to be. What it won't do really is actually the equitable distribution. And for that, I've built one, for instance, for my own firm that does the equitable distribution portion of it. But there's more subjectivity in the equitable distribution than most people think about. It's meant to be equal. It is meant to be equitable. And equity sometimes requires that it be unequal. And we have to include those things. Whereas, the child support calculation is a little bit more strict because it's the right of the child to be supported. It's not, and the courts are really just looking at what are the resources of the parents to support this child or children. But yeah, so that's what that software is about.
So
Break time again. I hate to do it to us.
okay.
It flies when you're having fun. And I'm sure that there are questions. Francis, can we get your phone number again for folks?
Yes, 413-773-3333.
And of course, it's hugyourmoney.com. And for today, as we're talking to Christopher here, you can get more details too about topics we're talking about at Christopher's website, which is newleaf.family/moneydoctor, and doctor is spelled out, DOCTOR. And we'll be back with more of Financial Fitness with Dr. Francis Ram.
Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor is underwritten by Franklin County Technical School. We build futures. Visit fcts.us or call 413-863-9561.
Welcome back to Financial Fitness. I'm Jay Dean, along with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Ram, and our guest is Christopher Anderson, attorney, counselor. What's nice is that you've got somebody, Francis, obviously you can tell by talking to Chris. He's got empathy. He's kind, but at the same time, if you have him on your team, it's like having Mr. Spock or Data from Star Trek, or who's the guy from Big Bang Theory? He probably could explain, quantum string theory to you, or whatever it's called.
Oh, we could go there if you want to, but it doesn't usually help in family law cases.
No, but it's very nice to be able to see things from the whole perspective. As we say, this is emotional, but you've got to look at things in the cold, cruel light of day when you're dealing with these issues, yes?
Yeah, and cold, cruel light reminds me. So we've been all warm and fuzzy talking about how we're going to help people and help them through their emotions and help them through their money. I have two words for you: child support. This form, I'm just going to go on a bit of a rant here, tiny little rant. This lovely financial form that we all spend a lot of time preparing for the courts and which goes to the courts. In our state, the child support is a factor of your income. And what I find to be unfair, maybe not equitable, is that calculation doesn't necessarily take into account the amount of debt payments they have, other expenses. It's their income. Now, if you have no debt versus having debt, your income is doing a different job. So what can you tell us about child support and what can possibly make that fairer? Because what I see often, all too often, is now there's been a division. The one partner, it doesn't matter whether it's the wife or the husband, but one partner is living in the house, getting an income from alimony or child support, doing kind of okay. And the other person is, maybe not living in their car, but definitely not able to move forward financially because the child support is so high. I'm all for supporting children, but sometimes they will come to me and they'll say, in 6 years, I'm going to be able to buy a house again.
Right.
What can you say about the child support part? It's so difficult here.
It is. First of all, it just is. And it goes back to kind of what you were talking about earlier, which is that you create two households where there was one, and it's harder, it's more expensive. And then, we've been talking about equitable distribution of assets and debts. But now we're also going to be talking about, like, when you think about child support, you also have to think about the fact that you're now having shared parenting time much of the time. So you've got two sets of bedrooms, two sets of clothes, two sets of Count Chocula, two sets of everything, two parents driving kids to plays and swim practice, and the list goes on. Two sets of childcare sometimes, and so all these additional expenses, and you get one parent, often both parents, who say, "I just can't make it this way. Like, I can't." And indeed, like you said, if one person's receiving the support and living in the house, like, it may fall harder on one parent, or feel like it falls harder on one parent than the other.
What I hear people complain about who are paying child support and who have joint custody, I think is a valid complaint. The kids are here half the time. I spend half the food, I spend all of this, and I still pay child support. And in an amicable situation, you can work that out. But what the court decides is maybe another story.
Right. And let's talk about the concept first. Like, because I think people do get themselves wrapped up and tied up into knots over exactly the words you just used. But let's talk about the concept, and also where it can go wrong and where it does go wrong. So the concept is this: spouse one has income one, and spouse two has income two. From the court's perspective, you mash the two incomes together and you get a total income. And then the court says, if there's two children, those two children deserve to be supported to a certain dollar amount based on this total income. I don't care where the income comes from. Now, I'm going to go back and say, okay, well, 60% was spouse one, 40% was spouse two. So spouse one is responsible for 60% of that total amount that goes to the kids. So we need to move 10% over to spouse two. And so that now you both have the resources to do your share. That's the concept, right? It's that the kids are being supported from the combined income. And it comes from an illusion. And we could talk about policy later, but the illusion is that the children should not suffer any diminution of their support because there's been a divorce.
Right.
They should be supported in exactly the same way as had the parents stayed together. But we just got done discussing the fact that there's all these additional expenses. And so that kind of makes it feel unfair. But it's unfair equally or equitably in a way, right? Because both parties have additional expenses. And when one party's handing over a check to the other party, they know that it's not covering all of it. The party who's receiving is also supposed to be applying some of their own resources to the children as well. And it's just supposed to equal it out. How does it end up working out? Sometimes it feels like a burden. But this is where I just have to remind people that what they're really feeling is the fact that it's more expensive to live this way. And it's more expensive to be a single parent and have, because each of you now has almost 100% of the expenses that you used to share. Because like we just said, the Count Chocula and everything else, you each are supporting all of this. And it's really hurting both sides. And most people that are making the complaint are feeling it themselves and not really understanding that it's actually hurting both sides. And so what we try to work with on our clients, and I'm sure you do too, is to remind them that this is not a universe of lack. This is not a zero-sum game. And if you're going to live this way, then we're going to have to perhaps have some conversations about what you're bringing in and what's going out. But then you also raise something that's, I think, super, super important, which is not only do you have to look at those two things, but when the child support calculation says X, and you said, sometimes one person's got all this debt or like all these other burdens, and it doesn't really take that into effect. That's where good lawyering really becomes important. You've got to be able to tell that story to the court during the process. Oh, we get so many clients that come to us afterwards.
I know.
Say, oh, the court didn't understand. The court, we get clients that come to us all the time. I can't pay this.
Yeah.
I just can't pay this.
That's right.
I can't believe they did this to me. And the problem is that the court didn't know because nobody told the judges aren't omniscient. The judges can't see behind the paper unless someone tells them the story. And that's where, the really solid lawyering that can tell a story, that can tell the story of the children, tell the story of the parents, tell the story of the future, and say, Judge, this is what's going to happen here, right? What we're setting up, we're walking these people into failure for themselves and for these children. Let's not do that. Let's write a different story. That has to happen right in the moment or it's lost.
Yeah, again, we're totally on the same page about this. That's why the work up front financially helps, right? To build a budget, to look at all the debt, to have the retirement assets, to have everything in one place where we can organize it and say, here's the whole picture, here's the holistic picture, and how are we going to fund your future? And then work with an attorney on this, right? I would call this death by 1,000 cuts in some ways for people. They tend to default to equal rather than equitable or fair because the math is easy. And then what happens is people start to chip away at it without a good attorney in the mix who will hold up and say, wait, you might be being unfair to yourself. Right. They tend to say, oh, I'll take the Visa card. It's okay. I'll just give me the Visa card. Just shut up, go away. Give me the Visa card. Yeah. I'll take the car payment. No, yeah, you can stay in the house because I feel really bad about whatever. So I'm going to give you the house. And they make these little decisions that turn out to be a major problem in their finances when you're not talking to each other and amicably, and both of you looking at the whole picture. And then what happens is they bring this information to the court. The decision is made. Everybody agrees. It's done. Try and unravel that later. Yes, you can go back into court and complain that your child support is unfair. It's very hard to do, I think. So I just really think that is terribly important to get everybody on the same page financially, even though you're already emotionally a wreck and you don't want to do it. That's what skillful people are there to help you do, to offload that and just provide answers, but offload it to a professional. We have a few minutes left, and I wonder if you might share with us maybe an example of a story where you've seen a computer spit out a number that was clearly wrong for one of the parties.
I mean, it happens all the time because of the thing that you mentioned earlier. So I'm not going to think of a specific story because I'm just going to I'm amalgamating all the stories. The child support calculator looks at relative incomes. It doesn't look at resources. You talked about debts, and that's one thing, and we'll think about that as well, because all a debt is really at the end of the day is a negative resource. Right. And it doesn't look at resources. Like parent A might have, their parents are going to provide them a house.
They have a family safety net.
Or they have a pre-existing, because this doesn't go into the equitable distribution, a pre-existing trust fund or something that came before the marriage, and they're going to be able to rely on this and live a certain way, and also get paid child support, because that's what the computer spit out, because the computer only looked at income. And that's what the court will go with, because the court is seeing this case and then the next case and then the next case and then the next case. They don't have the time to look underneath. That's the lawyer's job. And if you think, and I'm talking to the listeners now, if you think that you who have not done this for a living are going to go in there and tell the story and be heard. I wish it were so, but it's not. To be heard, you've got to present in a way that's concise, that is in a format and in a way that the court can hear it quickly and understand and stop the presses for a second and go like, oh, we're about to make a big mistake. And we're going to really set these people up for a big, big problem. That's where the lawyering comes in, and it's so important because, and that's just one example, but the resources and or the debts. There are other examples, as well as, how the numbers can tell the wrong story, and that story needs to be told. And I just do want to mention, because you said you can go in and modify. Yeah.
It's hard. Yeah.
It's hard, and you have to show that something changed.
Right.
And then oftentimes the modification will only go as far as the change. The fundamental unfairness that underpinned it is kind of locked in.
Yeah.
And it's a much harder, is it impossible? No, but it's a much harder rock to move.
Yes. Yeah. When does it make sense for lawyers to introduce to the picture a financial professional, or when is it overkill? Is it ever overkill?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of things that are overkill. If people are of limited means, or there just aren't that many assets, or it's not that complicated, like that's just, you might just be adding an expense that they don't need to have. But to me, you bring in an expert, you bring in a financial professional, the same time you bring in a child psychologist, the same time you bring in any other experts into a case, which is when the story you're trying to tell involves matters of opinion or matters that are beyond the knowledge that you should expect the court to have. So somebody that needs to educate the court from a position of professional knowledge, of knowledge that's not common. That's when you bring them in. And that is, very often, like you got someone who's got a retirement out there that they're going to be relying on, or has an annuity, or has money coming in from this source or that source, or like we said, has this trust fund. How do you value that? How should you talk about how that affects their current ability to support? You know what? As a lawyer, I can have an opinion, but the court really shouldn't listen to my opinion. That's when you need the financial professional to come in and give that opinion that the court can rely on and say, okay, this person's got $1 million in a trust fund. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that they're going to spend $1 million this year. What does that mean to their ability to support these children? Only a financial professional can give the actual answer to that. That's when you need to bring them in.
Boy, I thank you so much for spending all this time with us and talking about this. The real goal here is understanding that divorce doesn't have to be war. It can be a process of realignment. And Christopher, I just want to thank you for helping us shed some light on that.
My absolute pleasure. Yes, it is a turning of a page.
Yep.
And walking into hopefully your fullest possible future, and having some professionals along the way to help you get there.
Thank
Francis, can we get your phone number for folks real quick?
Absolutely. It's 413-773-3333.
And of course, the website is hugyourmoney.com. We appreciate Christopher Anderson's time too. More information related to this whole show is at newleaf.family, then /Money Doctor, with doctor spelled out DOCTOR.
Yes.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Francis. It's been a great show.
And join us next time around for another edition of Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Ram.
Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor is underwritten by Hug Your Money.
Mission granted, chase your dream.
Hug Your Money, where financial wellness gets personal. Will you help us spread the word about financial fitness? Please like, subscribe, and choose all. Thank you.